The shot that ended Charlie Kirk's life tore through more than just the silence of a university campus. It ripped open a series of questions that remain unanswered to this day. What happened in those chaotic moments at Utah University, and why did the events that followed move so quickly to conceal, rather than clarify, the truth? Before we dive deeper into the unfolding story, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss any future updates as new revelations continue to surface. Charlie Kirk was addressing students at Utah University that morning, delivering one of his signature talks on civic engagement and the power of free speech. The atmosphere was energetic, filled with laughter, cameras, and conversation. Then, without warning, a single shot broke through the noise. Panic erupted as students dove for cover. Phones dropped, and the once bustling auditorium turned into a scene of confusion and horror. Within minutes, the news spread like wildfire. Charlie Kirk, a well-known voice among young audiences, had been fatally shot. What was supposed to be a day of learning and inspiration became one of mourning and disbelief. Almost immediately, questions began to surface about how such a tragedy could occur in what was considered one of the safest campuses in the region. The situation quickly attracted national attention, not only because of who Charlie Kirk was, but also because of the strange and secretive response that followed. In the hours after the shooting, instead of transparency and clarity, what emerged was silence, control, and a tightening grip on information that left the public in the dark. Perhaps the most startling part of the entire ordeal was the rapid arrival of the FBI. Witnesses described federal agents on the scene almost instantly, faster than local law enforcement could fully cordon off the area. The speed of their response was extraordinary, even for high-profile incidents. Normally, a campus shooting investigation begins with local police securing evidence and interviewing witnesses before federal agencies become involved. But this time, the process seemed reversed. Within hours, the FBI had taken control, sealing access to critical evidence, restricting footage, and instructing witnesses to remain silent. This unusually fast intervention raised an immediate red flag for journalists and legal observers. Why would federal agents arrive so quickly, and what did they already know? For the families and friends of those present, this heavy-handed approach didn't bring comfort. It brought concern. By the following day, the flow of information had slowed to a trickle. Statements were carefully scripted, access to public records was denied, and any evidence that could provide context was locked away under federal seal. Even before the dust had settled, the name of a suspect began circulating: Tyler Robinson. A young man in his early 20s, Robinson was quickly identified as the alleged shooter. But as details emerged, the narrative became far less certain. While some evidence linked him to the scene, inconsistencies in timelines, motives, and behavior began to surface. Robinson was described by those who knew him as quiet but deeply opinionated, often engaging in online debates that sometimes veered into hostility. Investigators uncovered a series of digital traces, messages, and posts that hinted at resentment towards certain public figures, including Kirk. But as analysts dug deeper, the question shifted from why he acted to whether he acted alone. Witnesses reported seeing more than one person near the stage before the shooting. Others described hearing multiple sounds that didn't align with a single firearm discharge. Yet, despite these conflicting accounts, authorities doubled down on the lone shooter narrative, shutting down speculation of any broader plot. The inconsistencies between what witnesses saw and what officials declared have since become one of the most debated aspects of a case. Adding to the confusion was the handling of evidence. Key materials, including security footage, phone records, and the autopsy report, were immediately classified. In Utah, autopsy results in criminal cases can be sealed under certain conditions, but the speed and extent of restriction in this case went far beyond standard procedure. Even the hospital's treatment records were withheld. To many observers, this suggested a deliberate effort to manage the story, not investigate it. More eyebrows were raised when reports revealed that several key figures involved in the case were newly appointed officials. From the lead FBI agent assigned to the investigation, to the hospital's chief medical officer, to the presiding judge, each had assumed their positions only weeks or months before the shooting. In isolation, that might mean nothing. But taken together, it painted an unsettling picture of coincidence or coordination. These new appointees now held control over every major aspect of the case, from medical response to legal proceedings, leaving the public with even less confidence in the system. One of the most puzzling decisions was the choice of hospital where Charlie Kirk was taken after the shooting. Rather than being rushed to the nearest and most equipped trauma center, known for its expertise in handling severe injuries, he was transported to a smaller regional facility. That hospital had a newly appointed CEO and lead trauma surgeon. Both were relatively new to the state, and their connection to the case remains unclear. The question lingers: was this a simple logistical decision, or something more deliberate? For those searching for answers, it was yet another example of how every step of this tragedy seemed to follow an unusual script. As legal proceedings began, transparency continued to erode. Court documents were sealed at an unprecedented rate, with some filings labeled as involving national security considerations. This phrase, rarely seen in state-level homicide cases, suggested that the matter extended beyond a routine criminal investigation. Attorneys for the defense expressed frustration, claiming that evidence crucial to their client's case was being withheld or redacted. Meanwhile, the prosecution pressed forward as though the narrative had already been decided. The trial's pace was accelerated, timelines condensed, and requests for additional evidence review quietly denied. Observers watching the case unfold began to recognize a pattern, one that seemed less about justice and more about containment. The focus wasn't just on identifying who pulled the trigger, but on controlling how the story was told. Federal oversight, expedited hearings, sealed files. All these actions combined to shape a narrative tightly controlled by those in power. Whether that control was motivated by national security, political optics, or something deeper remains a matter of speculation. In the aftermath, the consequences of this secrecy have been deeply felt. Charlie Kirk's death, tragic in itself, became the center of a growing crisis of trust. The community that once gathered to celebrate his voice now finds itself divided between belief and doubt, between mourning and suspicion. Candlelight vigils continue to take place, but they're shadowed by frustration, not just over the loss of life, but over the loss of truth. Each unanswered question and each sealed record stands as a reminder that justice, in this case, feels incomplete. For the family, the grief is compounded by the silence. They've received few updates beyond the official statements that have already been made public. Advocates for transparency have filed multiple petitions to unseal the autopsy and investigative reports, arguing that withholding them serves no purpose but to protect reputations. Yet, as of today, those requests remain denied. This case is not just about one man's death. It's about the system that handled it, how institutions respond when tragedy intersects with influence, and whether the pursuit of truth is still possible when power decides what the public gets to see. The rapid federal involvement, the sealed evidence, the newly appointed officials, and the fast-tracked legal process, all of it points to a troubling question. Was justice truly the goal, or was this tragedy managed to preserve something else? In the end, Charlie Kirk's story serves as a mirror reflecting larger issues within modern justice, the tension between truth and control, between transparency and secrecy. As long as key facts remain hidden, closure will remain out of reach. The public deserves clarity, and the family deserves more than silence. Stay informed, stay questioning, and continue following this developing story. Don't forget to subscribe for more in-depth reports as we uncover new details behind Charlie Kirk's death and the search for real justice.